Hello and welcome to the July BigFix Briefing Room. I'm Michelle McGough and I'm here with Mr. Joe Saylor. And this month we're going to go straight away into the exploits. Then we'll cover the Microsoft and Linux vulnerabilities and the BigFix inventory new release. Take it away, Joe.
Yeah, so we're going straight into the big boy for this month. In the Windows Remote Desktop licensing service, there is just an absolutely massive remote code execution vulnerability. Fortunately, this service isn't installed by default. It does require, an actual person to go enable the service on a server. So this isn't something that you'll see on all of your desktops. It's not something that will be on even all of your servers. But anywhere that it is installed, an attacker can today just take your system over. So if it's exposed to the internet at all, then your system can be owned. This is one of those ones where, like, please stop listening to me and go update your service right now. Like, turn it off. We'll be here in a minute. Like, it'll be fine. Go update your remote desktop licensing server services. This is all on port 135 by default, so you can control this through network controls as well if you can't get to patching all of these boxes immediately.
Yeah, when I was researching this too, I saw that Microsoft recommends disabling it and patching, whether you're using it or not. And I think it's a good time to plug the BigFix remote control solution. If you had that, you wouldn't be worried about this right now.
Yeah, for sure. It's a fun way to go. I approve of it anyway.
What's next?
And to spread the love around to Linux a little bit here, we also have an absolutely massive vulnerability in the OpenSSH application that's in basically any Linux release. If you are a Linux administrator, you of course know what SSH is. It's like the primary method anybody uses to control these boxes. It's named regression, which is pretty appropriate. This was actually the same vulnerability that got closed in 2006 in SSH, which is like this is old enough to drive. Like it's forever. This was originally found in the before times. So what happened was in the 2020 release of OpenSSH, there was a regression. Nobody tested this same vulnerability that existed way back when. A critical component got replaced, and it's been here ever since. So this vulnerability, again, it's an unauthenticated remote control exploit of the OpenSSH application. So anything that's listening on port 2022 is probably vulnerable, and I'm certain that we're going to see just a massive amount of scans on the internet of attackers looking for stuff on 22.
Yeah, I saw that Census and I think another scanning solution, they did searches and found 14 million vulnerable OpenSSH server instances exposed to the internet for this right now. So yeah, that's just,
Yeah, this isn't an attack surface. This is an attack ocean. Like, it's just everywhere. One thing that this really underscores to me, though, is, of course, close this vulnerability. Like, please update SSH right now on all of your boxes. But it really highlights how important it is to just reduce the attack surface on this kind of control application in general. So, again, we know the default port is 22. So control what IPs can access your network on port 2022, right? Like, for all of your servers, make sure only trusted sources can get to your boxes on 22.
Great advice, Jim. What's next? I apologize for this icon. I couldn't help myself.
There's no need to apologize. This is perfect. Absolutely perfect. This is a destroyed teddy bear situation. So Polyfill.js is a library that's used in like everything. Like, it's pretty widely spread in web applications. So not something you run locally on your box, but something that an internet site would serve to you. Super popular. It helps with backward compatibility for browsers. So older Internet Explorer versions or whatever. That's what this thing does. And what happened here is some hostile actor, some Chinese threat group, bought the Polyfill.io domain. That's the CDN that distributes the library. It's pretty standard practice in web pages to load stuff dynamically from the source, so you get kind of a newer version. And any site that does that today with the Polyfill.io domain is now having malicious code inserted into their databases because this Chinese threat group owns the domain and can serve whatever they want whenever a request is made for Polyfill.
So this would mean anything that we're browsing to, we could potentially run into this. Any, valid vendor website, valid commerce, consumer commerce website, we could see this?
Yeah, anywhere, right? Like this doesn't require some, vendor to make a mistake in their code. This is just standard practice that's out there in the wild everywhere. And now it's just inserting malware into your box whenever you visit what should be a trusted site.
Okay. And can we trust the browser to warn us about this?
Sometimes. So this has been an all hands on deck. This is an evolving situation at all of the CDNs today and service providers today. For instance, Cloudflare has implemented a dynamic injection for any polyfill requests to just ignore the CDN that it's trying to get to and inject the real version of polyfill.
Okay.
So vendors are doing stuff about this. Chrome, I believe, has a special warning today. So if you get warnings in your browser for at least the next week or two, like read them maybe. Don't just click yes. Clicking yes is the enemy today.
Okay, I'm going to be looking out for that one. Thanks, Joe.
Now, I apologize for this
enjoying
slide.
No, I like it. Yeah,
so
this one, can I introduce this one because I saw it and I was really surprised. Thanks. So I saw this on, I think I was on Dark Reading, and it turns out this fella, and maybe it's more people, but this fella in Perth was caught on an airline. He had a Wi-Fi device with him, and he had been serving a fake Wi-Fi service right there on the plane for free. So when people wanted to check their email or send a text and went to get the airplane Wi-Fi, they had the choice between, the one that you have to pay for and this free one. And they picked the free one, and it asked them to do things like sign in with their Facebook credentials, which they did. And he was capturing those credentials and had intended to sell them. There were also people discovered it wasn't just in Perth, there was someone in Melbourne that was busted for this, and also Adelaide. So we know it's happening in Australia. I don't know if this is happening in other places, but I put it to you this way: unless you're in some special frequent flyer program, that Wi-Fi is going to cost a lot of money. Don't pick the free one.
Yeah, this is one of those things that really makes me want to stay home just all the time.
Yeah, we got the hotel Wi-Fi, there's so much like malicious Wi-Fi out there right now than the hotel kiosks, right, from last month. Traveling is it just seems dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, the friendly skies are becoming just really unfriendly. So, in addition now to maybe having the front of your Boeing plane fall off, or having children scream at you the whole flight, or having somebody kick the beat to Baby Got Back into the back of your seat. Now you can also have your credit card information stolen. So flying's scary. Why is it scary now? I don't like it.
I don't even know what to say, but you have to have a sense of humor about these things, or you're just never going to get through the day because there's a lot happening. What is next? Oh yeah, the Microsoft security. This was a big month, Joe. Do you want to break that down for us?
Yeah, so we're kind of moving into the more boring line of business stuff here. The Microsoft Patch Tuesday this month was kind of big. You'll notice the numbers on screen here are just much bigger than usual. We've got 142 total CVEs closed. We got 4 CVEs and 2 pretty big criticals. that just generally wreck Microsoft app servers this month. That's up like, from a usual month where it's like 50 to 60 to 70 CVs, something like that. So general numbers are quite high.
Yeah, this is more than May and June combined.
Yeah. And into some specifics here. So of our 0 days, we have 2 that are actually under active exploit, which is pretty rare. Generally, 0 days are important because they've just been disclosed before a fix is available, not necessarily because there's code out in the wild that currently will break you with them. But these 2 have stuff out there today. The first one is a vulnerability in MS-HTML, which is just, the interface that the operating system has with HTML stuff in general. This one they call a remote code execution vulnerability, but it's really more of a local code execution vulnerability. It does require a user to be tricked into clicking on a file. So, even though it's a 0 day and under active exploit, it doesn't pass that bar where there isn't a there's a no interaction exploit out there, right? So it requires a user to make a mistake. And then moving on to the Hyper-V elevation of privileges vulnerability. This one is maybe more worrisome than it appears. There actually isn't really any sort of detail on it, which is very concerning. When I was reading through, all of the CVEs for this month, like this one really stood out because it was very much just like a Frankenstein's monster situation that just said Hyper-V bad, and that's it.
Yeah, yeah. And it was only rated 6.8 as of, I think, yesterday. So they bumped the severity up. It was either yesterday or maybe Monday. It was a 6.8. So at least they've increased it. But how do you know if you've been compromised? Like there's not enough information there to even figure that out.
Yeah, the only information we really have is that it does require a local attacker that's authenticated to take advantage of it. So we know for sure they can elevate the system. What isn't super clear, and I'm kind of worried about, is that there's no information on whether this is a sandbox escape as well, right? So I kind of suspect maybe there is, just because of the extreme lack of detail. So keep an eye on this one. I worry because of that lack of detail.
Thanks, Joe. Normal, boring 0 days?
Yeah, the ones that aren't actively exploited, like a normal 0 day should. So these ones are, one's more interesting than the other. Starting off with the .NET and Visual Studio remote code execution. This vulnerability, again, I had to kind of read between the lines on it, on the description, but it looks like it requires a machine in the middle to exploit. So you do have to be tricked into connecting to a device somewhere that's maliciously owned, which is a bit of a barrier to clear, right? Like that's not impossible, especially with how embedded .NET is everywhere. You could have a .NET application connecting just somewhere out in the wild, and maybe you get redirected by a malicious DNS, and then this could break your system. So it seems not great to me. It seems difficult to exploit, but not terribly easy to exploit anyway, right? Like someone's got to make a mistake in order for this to be taken advantage of.
Okay, I'm surprised to see you highlighting a 5.9. Is this one worse than it looks?
It kind of isn't. So this is just falls under the 0 days we got to talk about because they were disclosed before there was a fix available. The reason that's important is that creates a race between when the vendor can get a fix out and when an attacker can exploit it. These typically get looked at more by threat groups. Okay. So, the previous one for .NET and Visual Studio is important because threat groups have had some time to figure out how to exploit it, right? Yeah. And they have even more time because you aren't necessarily going to go fix every .NET instance immediately when this patch has come out, right? Like nobody's updated their entire enterprise today. for this. So that extra lead time makes it a juicier target, and so there's more investment in attempting to exploit it.
Good catch, Joe. Thank you.
Yeah, and then just a detail on the ARM system memory snooping one. So that's on systems that have ARM hardware, and this is, I'm sure this is going to show up in the Linux space as well. But a local attacker can see what's in memory. So, you know, that's a pretty heavy disclosure, information disclosure vulnerability. That's stuff like passwords, credit card information, right? Anything that an application can read, a local attacker can read as well on ARM boxes until this is closed.
Okay. These look a little more interesting.
Yeah, a little more interesting. Moving up the vulnerability totem pole a bit here. So there is an issue with the Defender for IoT server. They're calling it an elevation of privilege vulnerability, but I really wish we had better ways to categorize this, because sure, you can elevate privileges from a low privilege user, and this does require authentication, so there's that barrier to clear, right? So an account has to be compromised. It allows that user to elevate their privileges all the way to taking over the container of the application. So we're really talking about like much more than just elevating privileges, right? So yes, they get high privileges, but they can also execute code inside the container, which is like way worse than just the privileges.
So Defender, I mean, a lot of people are using Defender. I don't know about in the IoT space, but what's the recommendation here?
Yeah, I mean, update for sure. Because it requires authentication, this is your attack surface is minimized with just good user hygiene. So, you know, don't have a million users that can log in and configure your container, right?
Yeah.
Like this is on the server side. So, you know, minimizing the number of users that have access to this minimizes the number of accounts that could be targeted and taken advantage of for this purpose.
Good old least privilege. Yeah, there's a reason. Okay.
All right, and then pivoting over to the general Linux kernel security space, there's a few 7 or higher this month. We're up to 9, which is kind of unusual for the Linux space, but not terribly concerning. One thing that really breaks my heart here, I gotta pour one out for my homie Tab. It's my favorite button on the keyboard. Like auto-completing text is my life, and there is a bug in the Linux kernel today where hitting tab can overflow your memory, and I can't even imagine how an attacker would exploit this other than just crashing your system. But you know, with the buffer overflow, like it'll for sure crash the app and maybe lead to some local code exploitation. It's just very sad. Just breaks my heart.
More of an up arrow person myself, but
I suppose that's fine. In addition to that, there's a slightly unusual one in the IPv6 socket exhaustion vulnerability issue. So an IPv6 server in the Linux space today has a really low max socket size set, and so it's actually pretty easy to launch a denial of service attack against Linux servers with default settings in the IPv6 space and just like take it down with just a few boxes pointed at it.
okay.
So that one's pretty important on any of your servers for sure. And otherwise, we have just some general local attack vectors. None of them are very surprising. None of them are very threatening. They all require some user to have like locally authenticated and execute some malicious code, which is not great, but you know, relative to some of these other unauthenticated remote code exploits, they're small potatoes for sure.
Okay, yeah, not quite as bad as last month, but a little bit more activity than I think we're used to seeing for Linux.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, and finally, just today, we've got a new release for BigFix inventory. We're up to inventory 11 finally. So with that version number change, I'm sure anybody who uses this has noticed that the site is currently named V10. And now that we are V11, you got to subscribe to a new site. We've actually split them into two separate sites. So the application itself has a V11 site to install like the server and things like that, and then content will come from a separate site. So for sure, check the forum posts on that to look into the details. We aren't getting rid of the V10 site, so that'll be out there. It just won't get updates anymore. So nothing will break, as this transition occurs. Some of the highlights for the V11 release, we have some more streamlined Oracle support. If you're using any sort of Oracle detection today, you're probably very annoyed at how you have to kind of do some manual cleanup every now and then, and so we've automated that away. So that little bit of workload is just gone with V11. We have a huge number of libraries have been updated in BigFix inventory. So as a security release, this is really great news. There's all sorts of things that maybe are not technically vulnerable today, nothing particularly worrisome, certainly, but we're just keeping up on those libraries. So it's great for peace of mind. One other little note is that there's a change in the catalog update system, and so future catalog updates will require V11. So keep an eye out for that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is good. It's nice to see this out. There's been a lot of activity in inventory, especially around the certifications with other vendors. So we've got the Oracle attestation. There's also for IBM. So we've got the additional capabilities built in there for audit scenarios, and that's a wonderful thing to have. And I'm excited to see V11. I think it'll be a lot easier for us to publish those catalog updates. So as long as everybody goes and subscribes to the right site, we'll be all sorted out.
We sure will. And I think that's it for this month.
All right. Well, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy this type of content. We'll see you again next month.
Bye all.